Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're zooming in on a massive, fundamental shift happening right now across global energy markets. For years, investors have basically been conditioned to look at aging solar infrastructure and just see a looming, expensive liability. Well, today, we're going to completely rewire that exact mindset. We are shifting away from that outdated liability framework and moving toward a highly strategic asset optimization approach. One that actually unlocks entirely new, incredibly lucrative avenues for yield.
So it's really the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? What exactly happens when those initial solar subsidies finally dry up? Because all around the world, tens of gigawatts of solar infrastructure are rapidly, and I mean rapidly, approaching the end of their subsidy life. We expect this massive wave to really peak right around 2030. Think about that scale for a second. We're talking about a sprawling, distributed portfolio of physical assets that are suddenly going to be unmoored from the fixed financial tariffs that justified building them in the first place.
Okay, let's dive into this, because there's a massive market distortion at play here. The legacy view out there treats these aging installations strictly as an end-of-life waste liability. It basically assumes the asset just dies the absolute second the subsidy disappears. But if we take a step back and apply a first principles view, the reality is completely different. These aren't liabilities at all. They are actually highly lucrative, severely mispriced composite assets that are absolutely primed for liquidity.
To break this all down, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the global solar transition, move into first principles and composite assets, explore the dual value integration, look at international yield arbitrage, and finally wrap up with lifecycle market infrastructure.
All right, let's get right into it with Section 1, the global solar transition, and specifically navigating the end-of-subsidy cliff. First off, the sheer scale we're dealing with here is staggering. We are talking about tens of gigawatts simultaneously entering the post-subsidy phase. So to be clear, this is not just some temporary market glitch. It is a fundamental, structural shift away from an end-of-life mindset toward a strategic asset exit strategy. And because of the highly staggered way all these installations were built over the last decade, this actually creates a sustained, continuous market cycle lasting anywhere from 10 to 20 years. For institutional investors, that is an unprecedented long-term window to capture liquidity and yield.
Moving right along to Section 2, First Principles, Composite Assets. Let's deconstruct the installation itself.
To really understand the actual value here, we use an approach called ab initio. It's a Latin term basically meaning from the beginning. It's a strict first principles approach where we evaluate a physical asset based purely on its fundamental, undeniable physical and legal realities. We are entirely discarding that loaded, inaccurate word waste. Instead, we're just looking at the hard, objective facts of the infrastructure literally sitting on the ground, completely ignoring any prevailing market biases.
When you actually break down a solar installation piece by piece, it becomes immediately clear that a plant is not just one giant, useless monolith once the subsidy ends. It's a composite asset. Think of it like a stacked puzzle. Grid access, for instance, holds massive independent value in connection rights alone. Then you have land rights, which offer ongoing utilization value. What about the actual hardware? Well, there are highly salvageable market-priced raw materials like copper, aluminum, and glass sitting right there ready to be monetized. And finally, generation, the ongoing non-subsidy capacity to just keep producing electricity. Every single distinct layer here holds its own independent, undeniable financial value.
Which brings us to Section 3, the dual value integration. We like to call this the barbell risk strategy.
So, picture a barbell. On one side, we have what we call the guaranteed floor. By systematically deconstructing that composite asset we just talked about, a very solid base value is secured directly by raw material markets. We are talking about highly liquid, global commodities here, primarily copper and aluminum. Think about it. Even if these panels never generate another single spark of electricity, that circular salvage floor essentially guarantees a very strong baseline recovery value.
Now, on the completely opposite side of that barbell, we have the generation ceiling. Once your baseline is totally secured by those raw materials, we can focus entirely on maximizing the ongoing yield. How? Well, this happens through repowering the site, basically extending its operational life, or transitioning the whole setup into non-subsidy operations, like securing private power purchase agreements.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive contrast in these valuation models. The old, legacy view gives you this single, flat valuation that, quite honestly, often dips straight into negative territory because people factor in huge, unnecessary demolition costs. But the dual value integration, it stacks the benefits. Your salvage floor completely protects the downside, while continued operations absolutely maximize the generation upside. So your downside risk is virtually wiped out by commodity value, while your upside is pushed as high as possible. It's incredibly efficient.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, International Yield Arbitrage. This is where we drastically expand the total addressable market. I want you to consider this core philosophy for a second. Equipment losing value in one market becomes a high-yield asset in another. That right there is the absolute engine behind cross-border redeployment. It is, quite frankly, the ultimate yield arbitrage.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, in highly mature markets, a slightly older, maybe slightly degraded panel might entirely fail to pencil out in a strict, subsidized financial model. But if you take that exact same equipment and redeploy it to high-growth Asian economies, the math flips entirely. Because of the truly exorbitant local electricity rates in these specific regions, setting up on-site generation for ideal local off-takers, we're talking schools, local factories, community cooperatives, instantly turns that equipment back into a high-yield asset. It fundamentally shifts the yield curve and creates a brilliant international arbitrage opportunity.
Okay, wrapping up with Section 5, Lifecycle Market Infrastructure. This is the execution pipeline.
All of this relies on a rapid execution model that is specifically designed for massive scale. Step 1 starts with pipeline reservation. That means systematically securing the asset flow via upfront contracts well before these plants even go offline. Step 2 is screening and branching. Here, we run that rigorous ab initio assessment to figure out the site's true composite value. And Step 3 is fast execution. This allows us to swiftly divert the incoming asset either toward continued generation or straight to rapid salvage. The real brilliance of this system is the sheer speed combined with total optionality.
So the crucial point to remember about this entire platform is simply this: we do not own the physical plants, we own the market infrastructure. By effectively controlling the flow of these assets without holding any heavy, stranded balance sheet risk, the model remains incredibly scalable, totally asset-light, and universally applicable. It literally sits above the physical assets themselves, extracting maximum value through intelligent routing and optimization.
As tens of gigawatts of global solar infrastructure enter this completely new phase, the market is quickly splitting into two very distinct camps. There are those who just see a costly, complicated cleanup, and then there are those who recognize a highly liquid, incredibly valuable composite asset. So I'll leave you with this. Is your portfolio still treating tomorrow's composite assets as yesterday's waste liabilities? If so, it might just be time to rethink your infrastructure strategy from first principles. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.